FHA SFR Appraising Handbook 4000.1, page 62. House as practicable. Etched on the HUD certification label is the certification label number, also referred to as the HUD label number. Label numbers are not required to be sequential on a multi-section house. Required analysis. And reporting. The appraiser must report the HUD label number for all sections, or report that the HUD certification label is missing or that the appraiser was unable to locate it. G. Data plate. Definition. Data plate refers to a paper document located on the interior of the property that contains specific information about the unit and its manufacturer. Standard. Manufactured homes have a data plate affixed in a permanent manner, typically adjacent to the electric service panel, the utility room, or within a cabinet in the kitchen. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must report the information on the data plate within the appraisal, including the manufacturer name, serial number, model, and date of manufacture, as well as wind, roof load, and thermal zone maps. If the data plate is missing or the appraiser is unable to locate it, the appraiser must report this in the appraisal and is not required to secure the data plate information from another source. Flood zone. H. The appraiser must stop work and contact the mortgagee if the appraiser determines that a manufactured home is located in FEMA flood zones A or V. The appraiser may continue to work on the assignment if the mortgagee provides a letter of map amendment, LOMA, or letter of map revision, LOMR, LOMR, or flood elevation certification. If the appraiser is provided with a LOMA or LOMR that removes the property from the flood zone, the appraiser does not need to indicate that the property is in a flood zone. If provided with an elevation certificate, the appraiser must indicate the property is in a flood hazard area on the appraisal report. I. Additions to manufactured housing. If the appraiser observes additions or structural changes to the original manufactured home, the appraiser must condition the appraisal upon inspection by the state or local jurisdiction administrative agency that inspects manufactured housing for compliance, or a licensed. Page 63. Structural engineer may report on the structural integrity of the manufactured dwelling and the addition if the state does not employ inspectors. J. Measurement protocols. The appraiser must calculate GLA based on the overall length, including living areas and other projections that are at least 7 feet in height. The appraiser must not include bay windows, roof overhangs, drawbars, couplings, or hitches in the length and width measurements. K. Sales comparison approach for manufactured housing. The appraiser must include a sufficient number of sales to produce a credible value. The appraiser must include at least 2 manufactured homes in the comparable sales grid. L. Estimate of costs new for manufactured housing. The appraiser must apply the cost approach for new construction manufactured housing. The appraiser can find specific requirements for the cost approach as applied to manufactured housing in the FHA Single Family Housing Appraisal Report and Data Delivery Guide, Manufactured Home Appraisal Report. 6. Condominium projects. Definition. A condominium project refers to a multi-unit property in which persons hold title to individual units and an undivided interest in common elements. Common elements areas include underlying land and buildings, driveways, parking areas, elevators, outside hallways, recreation and landscaped areas, and other elements described in the condominium declaration. Common areas are typically managed by a condominium association. Standard. A condominium project must be on the list of FHA approved condominiums unless it meets the definition for a site condominium. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must check if the condominium project is on the list of FHA approved condominiums. Page 64. D. Site condominium. Definition. A site condominium refers to a project of single-family, totally detached dwellings encumbered by a declaration of condominium covenants or a condominium form of ownership. They have no shared garages or any other attached buildings. Project approval is required for site condominiums that do not meet this definition. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must report the appraisal on Fannie Mae Form 1073/Freddie Mac Form 465, Individual Condominium Unit Appraisal Report. E. Manufactured Housing Condominium Projects. Standard. Individual manufactured housing units in condominium projects are eligible for FHA insurance on both HECM and Ford mortgages. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must report the appraisal on Fannie Mae Form 1004C/Freddie Mac Form 70-B, Manufactured Home Appraisal Report. In addition to the requirements for analysis and reporting of the manufactured home, the appraiser must inspect the condominium project and provide the project information data as an addendum to the appraisal report. Required data includes all data elements as found in the project information section of Fannie Mae Form 1073/Freddie Mac Form 465. 7. Valuation of leasehold interests. Definition. Leasehold interests refer to real estate where the residential improvements are located on land that is subject to long-term lease from the underlying fee owner, creating a divided estate in the property. Ground rent refers to the rent paid for the right to use and occupy the land. Improvements made by the ground lessee typically revert to the ground lessor at the end of the lease term. Standard. Eligible leasehold terms must meet the requirements included in leasehold interests. Page 65. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must obtain a copy of the lease from the mortgagee. The appraiser must analyze and report the terms of the ground lease, including the amount of the ground rent, the term of the lease, if the lease is renewable, if the lessee has the right of redemption, the right to obtain a fee simple title by paying the value of the leased fee to the lessor, thereby canceling the ground rent, and if the ground rent can increase or decrease over the life of the lease term. The appraiser must estimate and report the value of the leasehold interest using the calculation in the box below. The appraiser must provide support for the capitalization rate selected. Calculation of the leasehold interest. Formulas. Value of leased fee equals ground rent / capitalization rate. Value of leasehold equals value of fee simple minus value of leased fee. In valuing the leasehold interest, the appraiser must apply the appropriate techniques to each of the approaches to value included in the analysis. In the cost approach, the value of the land reported must be its leasehold interest. In the GRM income approach, the sales used to derive the GRM factor must be based on properties under similar ground rent terms or be adjusted to similar ground rent terms. In the sales comparison analysis, the comparable sales must be adjusted for their lack of similarity to the subject in the ownership rights section of the sales adjustment grid. D. Mixed use 1 to 4 unit single family properties. Definition. Mixed use refers to a property suitable for a combination of uses, including any of the following: commercial, residential, retail, office, or parking space. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must include all components of the real estate in the analysis. The appraiser must not include business valuation or the value of personal property or business fixtures in the appraisal. The appraiser must provide measurements and calculations of the building area on the building sketch to show what portion of the property is allocated to residential use and what portion is allocated to non-residential use. Page 66. The appraiser must provide a statement as to whether the commercial use will or will not affect the health and safety of the occupants of the residential property. 8. Additional appraisal requirements for 223E mortgages. Section 223E is a mortgage insurance program for properties located in older, declining urban areas. The program allows for the acquisition, repair, and / or renovation or construction of a residential property. The appraiser must provide a remaining physical life in addition to the remaining economic life. If the mortgagee orders an appraisal for a property to be insured under the 223E program. 9. Unimproved property appraisal. Definition. Unimproved property appraisal refers to the valuation of an interest in land without human-made structures. Standard. An unimproved property appraisal may be warranted when the property does not include building improvements. The prior improvements on the property were demolished. The improvements are in such deteriorated condition as to provide no contributory value to the property, or condemnation proceedings by the local authority have acquired the improvements in part or in their entirety. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must provide a written narrative format or a commercially available reporting form. The appraisal report must include at minimum the following: property address, legal description, owner of record, occupancy, assessment and tax information, property rights appraised, site size, zoning, highest and best use, shape, topography, drainage, availability of utilities. Page 67. If it is located within a FEMA designated SFHA, a sales grid including detailed information on at least 3 comparable sales, a quantitative comparison of those property attributes to the subject, and a comparison of the number of comparable unimproved properties sold with the number of offered and listed for sale to determine supply and demand, absorption rate, and other market data required so that the report is not misleading. Certification and limiting conditions as included in the URAR, Fannie Mae Form 1004/Freddie Mac Form 70, and any other forms and documentation necessary to comply with USPAP Standard 2. When completing the sales grid, the appraiser must compare and appropriately adjust the sales of comparable unimproved building lots or sites for differences in location, size, zoning, utility connection or availability of utility connection, site improvement, and any other pertinent factors. The appraiser must then reconcile the adjusted sales into a value conclusion. The appraiser must calculate and extract any costs to be incurred from raising the existing improvements and cleaning up the site from the value of the supporting land to arrive at a final conclusion of value of the site as if vacant and ready to be put to its highest and best use. 10. Update of appraisal. Appraisers may perform an update of a previously completed appraisal using the Fannie Mae Form 1004D/Freddie Mac Form 442/March 2005 when requested by the mortgagee. The appraiser must adhere to the scope of work and appraiser's certification listed on the form, which includes an exterior inspection of the subject property from at least the street, and research, analyze, and verify current market data to determine whether the property has or has not declined in value since the effective date of the appraisal report being updated. If the appraiser concurs with the original appraisal report and determines that the value has not declined, the appraiser must indicate this on the form, provide any necessary comments, and provide a photo of the front of the subject property taken from the public street. If the appraiser does not concur with the original data report or the property value has declined, the appraiser must indicate this on the form and a photo is not required. 11. Market Conditions Addendum. Fannie Mae Form 1004 MC/Freddie Mac Form 71. Instructions applicable to FHA appraisals. Standard. The appraiser must complete the Fannie Mae Form 1004 MC/Freddie Mac Form 71 market conditions addendum to the appraisal report for all appraisal assignments. The analysis and valuation of FHA insured properties must properly analyze and address market trends in the subject's market, whether these trends are positive, neutral, or negative. Proper data page 68. Collection and reporting are imperative components of a complete market conditions analysis. This is most important where markets are demonstrating negative trends. B. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must analyze the broad market area first, neighborhood analysis, then analyze the specific market, direct sales comparison, and then report how the subject relates to the market area. The appraiser must provide support for conclusions regarding housing trends and overall market conditions as reported in the neighborhood section of the appraisal report form. The appraiser's analysis and conclusions must be based on the information reported on this form. The appraiser's study of the market affecting the subject property must include sufficient data for a statistical analysis to be relevant. The appraiser must fill in all the information to the extent it is available and reliable, and must provide analysis as indicated. If any required data is unavailable or is considered unreliable, the appraiser must provide an explanation. It is recognized that not all data sources will be able to provide data for the shaded areas on the form. If it is available, however, the appraiser must include the data in the analysis. If data sources provide the required information as an average instead of the median, the appraiser must report the available figure and identify it as an average. The appraiser must explain any anomalies in the data, such as seasonal markets, new construction, foreclosures, etc. 12. Programs and products. Section 248, Indian Land Program. Property rights to be appraised. The appraiser must identify the interest to be appraised based on the type of ownership. A. Fee simple unrestricted. Fee simple unrestricted ownership refers to ownership in real property that may be bought, sold, or transferred between Native American and non-Native American purchasers without review by the tribe or the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA. B. Tribal trust lands, restricted trust land. Standard. The FHA Section 248 program ensures mortgages on houses that are located on Indian tribal trust land or restricted trust lands. For these properties, leased ownership of the underlying land remains with the tribe and will be subject to page 69. Long-term 50-year ground lease or a 25-year lease with a 25-year renewable term. Required analysis and reporting. The appraiser must determine the value for the leasehold estate using the analysis and reporting guidance on leasehold in this SF Handbook. Access to property. Tribally owned and maintained streets and utilities are considered publicly owned. The appraiser must report easements and maintenance agreements for non-public common ownership interests that affect the access and utility of the property. Approaches to value. The appraiser must be familiar with the applicable ownership and use restrictions and develop a credible value for the property. The supply of comparable sales and rental transactions varies by site and by tribe until sufficient sales exist on a reservation or within the specific Indian area to provide a reasonable sales comparison approach for determining the value of tribal trust leaseholds or allotted land sales. The appraiser must rely on other value indicators. The appraisal process must be documented more thoroughly than a typical market appraisal. USPAP standards number 1 and number 2 are effective in allowing the appraiser to correctly employ those recognized methods and techniques that are necessary to produce a credible appraisal. In addition, in reporting the results of a real property appraisal, an appraiser must communicate each analysis, opinion, and conclusion in a manner that is not misleading. An appraisal on trust land may rely more on the cost approach or data developed from other tribes. HUD will accept the report if the appraiser has documented the research information developed and conclusions clearly for the intended users to understand. Cost approach to value. The cost approach is often the primary indication of value based on the unique nature of land rights in the reservation. The value of the site as vacant will depend on the property rights held by an individual. If the appraiser's analysis indicates that the value of the site may be zero or a small leasehold value, the appraiser must enter this information in the cost approach section of the form and enter the statement, "Subject is on tribal trust land with annual rent not capitalized," in the comments section. If a market exists and an interest in the land was purchased, the value is estimated via traditional cost approach methods described in this SF handbook. A. Cost approach for new construction. The following are instructions specific to new construction on tribal lands. Page 70. In addition to including the cost of water, septic, and other on-site costs in the cost approach for lands within the reservation, the appraiser may provide an allowance for off-site development costs. The lesser of actual prorated costs, or up to 15% of the cost of the construction of the subject house, may be added for off-site infrastructure associated with development of the subject lot. This policy applies principally to new construction, where such charges are assessed by tribally approved entities such as housing entities or housing authorities, or agreements with other federal or local government bodies for providing power, utilities, sewer, water, or road construction. The costs to bring the utilities, including public water, sewer, electricity, and telephone, to sites represent significant development costs. The traditional tract development of residential houses may not be a part of the local culture. Therefore, the utility costs to hook up to any form of public system in a more rural area can exceed local standards. In remote areas, the construction costs in construction cost manuals may have to be adjusted for transportation, labor, or other costs not included in the basic estimate. Architect fees are not typically reflected in the base building costs due to special circumstances. The normal allocation for this fee may not automatically reflect the above actual cost. The appraiser must provide a supporting explanation for the adjustments to the construction costs. B. Cost approach for existing construction. Where market sales are limited, FHA requires the cost approach to be completed on all tribal trust appraisals, including a credible estimate for depreciation, in addition to developing the cost approach described in this SF handbook. The appraiser must report the following. 1. The name of the cost service. 2. The source and date, if electronic version. Upload and exhibit into the report when available. 3. The page numbers of cost tables or factors. If paper version, the reviewer or reader must be able to replicate. 4. All current multipliers applicable to locale and time as updated and published by the cost service used. And 5. Depreciation due to normal aging, which may be derived from the tables in the cost service book. A computer-generated cost analysis is acceptable in place of the above as long as the printout contains sufficient information to verify that all significant property features have been properly addressed in the cost analysis. Sales comparison approach to value. The appraiser must follow the sales comparison approach instructions outlined in this SF handbook. In addition to the typical data sources, the appraiser must obtain sales, page 71, information from the local tribal or BIA realty office if available. The appraiser may consider sales from other reservations within the region if appropriate. The order of selection preferences for sales depend upon the type of interest in the land being appraised. Tribal trust leasehold sales, market sales between tribal members, sales of allotted land trusts between tribal members, fee simple within the reservation, residual value of the improvements by adjusting out the land contribution, or fee simple approximate to the reservation. The appraiser must report the property rights in the ownership line of the grid and apply an appropriate adjustment if any. In addition, the appraiser must explain the differences in ownership rights of the comparable properties as compared to the subject and the basis for any adjustment. Income approach to value. If the appraiser determines that this approach can be credibly completed, refer to the income approach section in this SF handbook. If the property includes a rental unit or units, the appraiser must provide an estimate of monthly rent for each unit and note if the rent is limited to the tribal submarket. Final reconciliation of value. The appraiser must follow the final reconciliation of value instructions outlined in this SF handbook. Where market information is limited and the support for the sales comparison analysis is weaker, the appraiser may need to place greater consideration on the cost approach. Section 247, Hawaiian Homelands Program. Due to the nature of the title and property rights, the appraiser must develop the cost for both existing and proposed construction. When appropriate, The appraiser must attempt to apply the income and sales comparison approaches. The appraiser must include the following language in the appraisal report. The value defined for this appraisal is not market value as defined in the standard documents of form appraisal reports. This appraisal has been completed for FHA mortgage insurance purposes per HUD instructions for Department of Hawaiian Homelands DHHL properties. The appraiser must develop a cost approach from a published cost service in addition to developing the cost approach described in this SF handbook. The appraiser's report must include photocopies of all pages used to derive the cost figures except as noted below. Application of all current multipliers necessary and published by the cost service.